You are listening to Art Freaks. My name's Daniel Crossan. I'm an artist based in London. I'll be sitting down with a variety of creative people to find out why they make the things they make and what lessons they've learned along the way that will help you impact the world with your creativity. Today we are joined by London-based digital artist Peter the Roman. Peter the Roman has many years' experience as a fine artist and designer, but focuses much of his time on creating digital art that is unsettling and grotesque, yet it remains beautiful and it demands attention. Peter the Roman has had lots of success in the crypto art space, where he continues to attract loyal collectors of his work that's minted onto the blockchain. In his first ever recorded interview, we discuss those Banksy rumours, a difficult childhood, and the introduction of AI in the making of his work. Here is Peter the Roman. 2021 was an interesting time to jump on the roller coaster of crypto and NFTs, and most of the artists I know did at that time. In terms of like how much crypto and NFTs kind of took over what you were doing. So what were you doing before? Or when you found crypto and NFTs, were you making digital art before that?
Yeah, so I mean, my background is more traditional painting and sculpture, and I was a practicing artist for about like 12, 13 years, and I had been doing digital artwork. I went from doing physical painting work to more digital work for goods 3 or 4 years before the NFT craze and thing happened. So it was I was pretty much doing that full time before NFTs came along, and then all hell broke loose.
How were you making money? Like, how were you making money before the NFT boom?
Drugs. No.
Which drugs?
No, I mainly made money through either selling prints on the side when it comes to digital work. So that was the only way you could really make money through that, or like some commission work as well. But before that, I'm also a web developer. So I was developing websites as my main sort of income. So yeah, so I was kind of doing that for a while, and then NFTs came along, and it kind of pretty much, and that sounds drastic, but it pretty much turned my world upside down pretty quick.
Understandably, and I think for many digital artists, it was like the timing was really interesting and sort of perfect, really. And you were anonymous before NFTs. It wasn't something like a persona you took on for NFTs.
Yeah. I wanted to keep it separate from my painting sort of traditional art career that I did for over a decade, and I kind of wanted to keep it separate and have a kind of because it was very different to what I did with my painting. So my digital work actually became something else, and it was a new persona. And
did you feel kind of freedom with that?
Yeah, like the freedom that came with it, and just doing digital work in general was a big freeing experience for me, because I kind of, even though I love painting and making stuff, and I still do, but there was this kind of wonderful thing about digital art was that. Well, it's a bit of a perfect storm, because I lost my studio because I got priced out and big price hikes and stuff.
London.
Yeah, London. It's nuts. It's like you pay rent. It's almost like what you pay rent on an apartment. And so I kind of naturally just I've always been good with computers, being a web developer. I've played with these programs before, and it was kind of just a natural step. And it was, what I loved about it was that obviously it was clean, because I couldn't, be in my bedroom and paint and stuff. It's too messy. But also, like, I love the fact that there's an undo button. You can like make a mistake, and it's all kind of a lot more controlled.
I think it's interesting. So you were like in this studio. You kind of you didn't get kicked out, but you chose to leave because the rents hiked up too much, and then NFTs were sort of happening at the same time, and then the pandemic just sort of came out of nowhere. So there was this kind of like perfect storm, really. You were evolving as a digital artist, had created this persona that was giving you freedom, and then suddenly headlines were saying digital art is really valuable. It was just everywhere. NFTs were everywhere at one point, and I think the Beeple sale of 69 million kind of came just after I discovered NFTs. But there was already some Beeple auctions that had done mad money and were sort of infiltrating sort of art newspapers and stuff. But that massive sale for Beeple was a really big moment. And so discovering NFTs, I can imagine similarly to me, was just sort of mind-blowing and a lot of learning at the beginning to kind of figure out what people are talking about and where do you get information and who can you trust, and like all the anonymity and like pixelated pictures on Twitter. Like, who are these people? What is everything?
It was crazy. It was a crazy time. I mean, we were literally just like, what the fuck's going on? What is this? Do you know anything about NFTs? Or
when you first discover it, it's like, okay, digital art can be worth something. It can be scarce. Okay, I understand it. And then 2 months later, you're like, oh, but that thing that just looked like a rotating pixelated coin that I thought, somebody was selling as a visual thing to own actually unlocks like a whole community that help each other, in trading or something. So there was all this sort of layers of learning. How quickly after you discovered what NFTs were you sort of minting and putting art onto the blockchain?
Pretty sure it was OpenSea minted 3 or 4 artworks on there, and that they were luckily enough picked up by a collector who focused on OG sort of like first mint editions type thing.
But let's talk introduction to the NFT space. Did it feel less snooty, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I think there was less barriers to break down. I think, yeah, there was what I quite liked about it is there wasn't, at the time anyway, a bit different now, but like there was less cloak and dagger about it. It was like, here's my work, here's the price. Everyone can see the ins and outs. It's all on a blockchain, buy it, sell it on for profit. That's great. I get royalties. Everyone wins. It's kind of like that. Well, in the more traditional art world, it's less about that. You don't talk about money. It's a dirty word. It's all very cloak and dagger. You can't approach a gallery. You have to kind of plant seeds and make sure you get noticed by a gallery or collector, which is similar to what it is now actually in NFT space. But at the beginning, it felt very kind of more open.
Less rules.
Yeah. It was a new thing. It didn't feel like there was any rules whatsoever. It's a bit of a Wild West.
In terms of where NFTs are now, like if you were an artist that was interested in NFTs, or if you're like, I've been approached by a few of my friends who are on Instagram who are getting these scam DMs saying, I really want to buy your artwork as NFTs. Do you know what an NFT is? If you were an artist getting those DMs, but you were like, I got to learn what these NFTs are because I've just been hearing about them now for 2 years. What sort of, would you give any advice to artists coming into the space? Would you advise artists to play in this space during a bear market? Or would you tell them to wait until more bullish kind of scenario?
I would advise them if they really wanted to get into it and really interested in and believed in the future of it and stuff like that. Or maybe you don't even have to believe, but like I would suggest, like now is the time to play, because it's different to what it was, because now I feel like there's a lot more room to experiment. So if it's great if you're just starting out and there is no pressure like there was before. Like, I mean, there's still pressures like to sell, but if you're just starting out now, like you've got more room to experiment. You've got more time. I think there's more breathing room than it was before, because I think at the start it was 100 mile an hour, like literally. I mean, I didn't sleep. I mean, I was like up till like 2 or 3 in the morning making work, because I just felt like it because being in the UK based as well, like it's all on American time. So it kind of felt like you had to become a bit of a night owl to really kind of be awake really to what's happening, have fun, experiment, and just just mint some work. Don't even try not even to think about it too much, and just put it out there. And then don't worry if it doesn't sell. Mint more. Just keep on going. Communities there. There's lots of artists still there that kind of are very open, and yeah, just reach out to artists, and you'd be surprised how open everyone is, and yeah, accepting. So I think now is a good time if you're just starting out. I think
Well, it's certainly less pressure to learn things quickly.
it's a lot easier as well. There's I mean, when we first started it, there was no manifold. There was no way of really minting your own contract.
The tools are so much better now.
Yeah, so much.
And there's so many different kinds of interesting ways you can release artwork as NFTs that weren't available when we started. But also, I think the headlines that you were seeing, the ease of selling work is not there. I always hear sort of saying, "Oh, I can't post every day on Instagram." But then I say that's okay, but you're not going to grow on Instagram if you don't post every day, because that's what the algorithm wants to see. So if you're getting into NFTs and you want to sell NFTs to the NFT community, not your existing community, and try to onboard everybody to what an NFT is, you've still got to participate in those communities. You've still got to post on Twitter. So there's other things that come with that, and you might not get a sale. I remember speaking to a person that lives near me, and he said so he was talking about the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and he said and it was just after Eminem bought one, which I think sort of got talked about everywhere, didn't it? Because it was just such a big artist jumping in that community. And he said to me, "You're doing these NFTs, aren't you?" And he said, "Can you teach me how to do NFTs, or can you teach somebody in the family that's an artist how to do NFTs?" And then there was just one statement that was very telling, which was like, "Yeah, I've seen people buying these monkey pictures. Like, people will buy anything." And it was that people will buy anything thing. And you sometimes hear that in the art world, actually, where people are like my kid could do that. People will buy anything. And it's like, well, if they will buy anything, get red paint and splatter it across a yellow background and see if you can sell it, because I reckon you'll find it really, really hard. And I think it's with NFTs is the same thing. It's like, mint your artwork, sure, but you don't just mint your artwork, walk away, make a cup of tea, come back, and somebody's given you half an ETH. It's like the exact same as building a social media presence, exact same as like getting noticed by galleries, exact same as sort of, having enough of an audience to sell prints to. You've got to kind of sell your story, give something. I think there has to be something for people to, be interested in, whether that's your trajectory or your process or whatever. It's like you've still got to tell your story a little bit. Maybe we'll see echoes of 2021 again, where the hype of the NFT market and crypto market really at large is so hyper focused on one particular space, which is art, that we will be able to talk about it on Twitter for 24 hours and then get your first bid. That would be lovely. But I think we're seeing a sort of settling down, but I don't see like NFTs are dead. That's what a lot of people are saying. I don't see that as being the tech is going to go away and artists are no longer going to mint art on the blockchain. I think it's much more likely that we'll start to see similarities to the traditional art world in the sense that you have to build an audience that wants to kind of support you. Do you see it as like selling physical? So for example, you were selling prints. Will you try to get would you try to onboard people through social media and say like, do you want to, can I help onboard you to NFTs? Or do you just think the time will come?
I think the time will come. I mean, I've tried to, like you, yourself, like I experienced lots of friends and artist friends that wanted to get in NFTs. And then, I would explain to them how to do it. And most of them would be like, what are you talking about? I don't understand a word you're saying. It's all too technical. And other people that kind of did end up minting, and they just walked away. They posted it once or twice on Twitter, and then nothing. And like you were saying, it's a lot more work than just minting something and it would sell. It is very similar to. It's just in real life. Life isn't that that easy, is it?
No.
And we are slaves to the algorithm. But as for sorry, what was your question again?
I guess like trying to onboard people, because I've seen artists do that, and I was just wondering, in terms of going forward, like you've really gone down the digital path, and if NFT slows down to the point, where you're like, oh, you know what, I have so much of a body of work that I've been creating in the last 2 years for NFTs. I might sell these as physical prints, or maybe you sell them on digital screens, which is becoming much more of a thing. Would you then like be trying to like onboard people, like I'll help you set up a wallet and stuff like that? Or do you think it's just the narrative of NFTs is sort of damaged so much that you just sort of have to sit back and say, here's a print, and don't talk about NFTs because people don't want to hear it,
It is, I have to say, it is that more the latter, in a sense that I think, because NFTs, it's a dirty word now. Like it's used to like, it's become a bit of a meme in itself, isn't it? And I think trying to onboard new people, I don't think that's going to happen until it becomes seamless. Like you won't even know it's a digital, it's on a blockchain, it's an NFT. It's kind of, it will be all in the background. It will be as simple as like literally just clicking a button on Instagram or something and go, yeah, I want to add that to my collection. And I think there was talk of Instagram doing that, but that's all become very quiet at the moment. But I feel like further down the line, I think that's kind of the way it's going to be. And I don't think it will be just a digital asset. And if you want to own it and keep it, collect it, sell it, move it around, whatever. And like you said, the example of a Patreon sort of style of things could be one element of that, as us artists or like startup projects. But I do think there's too many, even now, like 2 or 3 years down the line, I think there's still too many barriers, technical barriers for the most kind of people that are just used to like having it easy, because it's all about convenience and to, people are used to just ordering an Uber or food comes to their house or Amazon Prime. It's got to be that easy for it to become mainstream, everyday sort of life sort of thing.
There's so much stuff you have to do to get to the point of pressing buy and the thing is, it's on the blockchain, so it makes sense that we're going to pay and exchange digital assets for digital assets. You talked about like the barriers, and I think like there's also like there's those tech barriers, right? The wallet, the knowing what blockchain technology is, the fact that the digital sort of, there's a digital sort of footprint from when it was created by the artist's wallet, and then it gets transferred, and then that transfer is sort of proof of ownership. All of those kind of things, like as we're talking about it, I'm sure that there's going to be people that are listening to this that are not into NFTs that are going to sort of be tuning out by this point. But I think the psychological barrier is the biggest thing, where it's like the psychological barrier of things being limited that are digital is massive, because we've grown up ever since dial-up internet, everything has been free. So like the only way the music industry could survive is by having streaming, which is free music basically. But the artists suffer, but it's the only way it can work, because otherwise it's just free and the artist gets zero. Do you know what I mean? So I think like the psychological thing is like, how can this picture on the internet, how can that be scarce? Right click copy. How is it that when I right click copy it and it goes onto my phone, that I don't own it? Because I can look at it every day. What does an NFT do? I don't understand what an NFT does. If it's art, I can just look at it. I can just look at it on my phone. So it's that thing of like, when I bought my first NFT, something clicked. I was like, oh, I own it. Now I can, my wallet is plugged into this marketplace and I can sell it. So I something clicked. And I think perhaps it's like years and years and years away, where it's like FIFA has NFTs and you're playing your computer game, and when you get your EA Sports, I mean EA Sports are already entering into the space with Nike. So we're going to see it. We're already seeing it in Fortnite. There's going to be wearables, but those wearables would be limited once. And also that this was always like a funny thing, was like the utility of the NFT is price goes up, because everyone was always like, well, what does it do? And honestly, like 95% of the space was like, I don't know, they just go up in price. It's like they don't do anything. So I think that's the thing, is like once NFTs are working and doing stuff for a whole generation of people playing games, for a whole generation of people that are messing around on AR, on Vision, Apple's Vision thing, I think then you start to see like, oh, okay, so you're wearing digital clothes. That's cool. Can I put those clothes on? No, these are my clothes. That another one of these clothes doesn't exist. So those kinds of things are going to be really slow. You remember like people paying with checks, how long it took to phase it out, where it was still like people were still accepting checks, and that's like, but a shop I worked in, we still accepted checks, but it was such a faff. It was like, why are we still doing this? And it was because our clientele was a little bit older sometimes. But yeah, I think that's like a nice roundup of NFTs. I think what I'd like to talk a little bit more about now is sort of your work in detail, which obviously you sold as NFTs and which has attracted a lot of attention in the NFT space from different communities. And yeah, and just like you being this elusive kind of sort of anonymous person that doesn't talk a lot on Twitter, that doesn't do interviews like this, or hasn't done before. Thank you for doing this one. Your work is very digital. When I got into NFTs, I was sort of jealous of digital artists, natively digital artists, because I was like, your work makes a bit more sense as NFTs, and it sort of doesn't work as well outside of NFTs. It works. It is displayed on the internet. It's displayed on screens. It's displayed digitally. It's made digitally. It makes sense that it should sort of exist and get traded digitally and stuff. So, yeah, the work is very sculptural, gloopy, blobby, grotesque. There's an element of kind of like ugliness to it, but they're always like beautiful colors and like these kind of like nice shiny bits that are very elegant. I don't know, it's like a real mix. How would you describe that kind of clash of beautiful and not, and not beautiful?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, what I've always kind of been interested in kind of the balance or hitting the spot in between beauty and the grotesque. And I think they're pretty much they're very much similar to each other, if not the same. I find, something really beautiful can also be quite grotesque in a way, and vice versa. And so it's just hitting that spot of something in between that kind of makes you feel slightly kind of uneasy, like there's something very attractive about it and very alluring and very kind of lustful about these physical melting forms and stuff. But at the same time, there's something quite off about it and quite as you're saying, very grotesque and something uncanny about it. And so that's always interested in me, even when I was in my painting days. They looked very different to what I do digitally, but I was always interested in the other, the hidden, or the something that wasn't quite right, something off, and something a little bit kind of enticing and stuff. And so that's always interested me when it came to that sort of thing, and the physical element of it. When I was at art school, my paintings were very physical and sculptural and full of big layers of thick paint that I'd scratch into and stuff. And so, yeah, when it came to digital work, the sculpture element of it, and I what I really liked about it is that I'm kind of obsessed with the white cube, the white space in a gallery, and I'm kind of I no matter how much I try to stay away from it and try to have a painting almost edge to edge, I can't help but put frame or have an object within a white space or any sort of space. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, I don't know where it's come from. I feel like maybe I miss the kind of white gallery space that I had with painting and traditional side of things. And then I kind of felt like that maybe that's kind of, I've kind of dreamt, it's almost like I'm dreaming or fantasizing about having these, digital
Exist in a
sculptures.
gallery.
It actually exists in a gallery or in a
really
space or in real life. And so I think with a lot of my digital work, I find I want to kind of make it feel like it's real, and it's sitting in a space, and it's almost like these things do exist. And I kind of like that idea, but obviously they don't, and they're kind of crazy, especially with the new AI stuff, is how to replicate that in real life. But yeah, so that's kind of, I found, and all this stuff kind of happened very naturally. I didn't even think about it, and that's what I experienced doing digital art for the first time, is that I didn't think about, and I think that's always, I didn't think about what I was going to do. I just did it. And I think I always find that art is at its best when you don't even think about it. You have this urge to do it, and you have that freedom to just go and create a weird drippy man or something, like walking along. And I didn't have the weight of history of painting on my shoulders or anything like that. It was new.
You're placing these digital objects into like this gallery space, or this gallery space. I think it's a space where you demand attention from the viewer to view this as fine art. I think that the presentation of whatever it is on a plinth or behind a gallery or on a stand that is reserved for fine art sculptures immediately demands that from the viewer. And I think that's a really clever way of positioning the work to separate it from other digital art, where it's like, this is commercial, or this is supposed to just impress you visually. It sort of demands a pause from the person that's looking at it to consider it in a way that they might consider it if it existed, or if you were in front of it at a gallery. You said that you wanted the work to make people feel uneasy, but also that like there is an element of rawness and self-expression in creating those things. Do you have feelings of uneasiness within that you're trying to sort of bring out in the world and sort of manifests in a visual way, if that makes sense? Yes,
the short answer is definitely yes. There's a lot of uneasiness I find, because I from a very early age kind of suffered from social phobia, which and I went to school and had to quit. Had to be homeschooled from an early age because I couldn't leave the house, basically. So it's a bit like agoraphobia, but I just couldn't interact with the real world. And so,
how long were you homeschooled for?
From the age of about 13, 14 till 17. And so I didn't really leave the house until I was heavily medicated. And then kind of just had a fairly normal life after that, and went to art school and went out and did, what young guys did. But there's always been a sense of being an outsider or not connected with society. And I've always struggled with that. And I still suffer now. Like, I still find it hard to leave the house quite regularly. And if I'm going through a bad patch. And so this is why selling digital work or being a digital artist is kind of feels quite native or natural to me, because I'm so kind of in my own kind of mind and world, and I suppose that the computer screen for me at times is my window to the rest of the world and stuff, and so I suppose in my work it must. I mean, I didn't really think about it too much, but it kind of manifest. You can't help but manifest yourself into the work at some point, and I guess that's where the uneasy, the sense of otherness, kind of otherworldly kind of feeling to a lot of my work, and the grotesque, ugly side of things. That's probably the fear of other people, the fear of myself, and what I project, and a lot of it's kind of superficial, and the fear of what other people think of you, and so all these kind of anxieties and fears. My therapist knows all about probably more than I do. I don't know if she's seen my work or not, but I think she'd be quite interested in it. But it kind of lends itself to all of that, and it touches upon those subjects, I feel, but it's very subconscious.
Thank you for being so open about that kind of stuff. I think it's not easy. If you look at some of your earlier pieces on Foundation, they are sort of melting masks, shiny melting masks on these figures, and that makes a lot of sense. Seeing as you have dealt with social phobia. And masks are kind of like, through the history of art, I've sort of fascinated a lot of different artists. Have you always had like a fascination for masks, tribal masks, and those kinds of things?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I always find, if you ever know Gillian Waring's work, she did a series of photographs where she would just put a mask of herself on herself and photograph it. And I always find that more interesting, because it's kind of like a mask that is her, but there's something quite not right, something quite off about it, something quite uncanny. And so, yeah, I would definitely check her work out. She uses a lot of masks, and her work is a lot about self-identity and what it's in society, and how people kind of pretend to be someone else, or a version of themselves, and that can lend itself to, obviously, being on Twitter and Instagram. You're not yourself; you're a version of yourself, and
showing the best parts of your life, because you're ashamed to show the mundane or boring or sad or hard parts of your life. So
so masks have always been very interesting, and like more traditional masks are fascinating, and a throughout history that they've been used to pretend to be someone else, or
invoke spirits, and
exactly,
like
gods.
Literally, become gods. I want to understand more a little bit about social phobia, and I wondered whether getting older, like having these kind of feelings of maybe fear about society or society's reaction to you, or do you feel, being older, do you feel like those were founded in reality? Like do you find aspects of society grotesque?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as I've got older, I won't say my age, but definitely as feels older.
Are you older or younger than me?
Well, I don't know. How old are you?
Let's not go
there. As I've got older, I think I've managed to kind of like, not put it in a box, but kind of just I've got a place to put it, and those feelings and thoughts, and I'm more aware of what they are. When I was a kid, I didn't know what was going on, and also, like, this might be showing my age a little bit, but there was times when I was at school, there was no anxiety wasn't even talked about. Like mental health wasn't talked about. It was like, oh, you're being a bit weird. Why aren't you going to school? You need to go to school. There was no, like, there was kind of like, there was a lot of kind of like, oh, let's get a doctor to speak to this kid, sort of thing. He's a bit shy. But I think if it happened now, I think it'd be very different. There'd be a lot more talked about anxiety, and you would be given the time and stuff. And so I think as a kid, I didn't know, and to be honest, I still don't know. I'm still working on it. I still don't know the root causes of it. But I think I need another 10 years of therapy. Probably, I don't know. But I know it's there, and I think it's worse now, as in more of a general sense, because of social media, that people are a lot more aware of these thoughts and feelings, because it's shoved in your face constantly, like people's perceptions and body image. You got to look a certain way. TV's changed a lot since we're younger. Like, I mean, for example, like if you remember Big Brother, UK Big Brother, the first series, everyone looked normal. There was ugly, short, fat.
I've been getting early Big Brother on TikTok for some reason, and because I'm like, oh, I remember that person, and I watch it through. That's told TikTok that all I want to see now is old Big Brother. So I keep getting it on my feed, and just seeing like normal people.
Yeah, like, it was great.
Great, but also looking back on it, it was like, this person's not acting normal. This person is being sort of like tortured by not having things that they should have access to, like going for a long walk and seeing like some trees. It's essentially a prison camp, and it is designed. There's challenges, there's things that it's designed to make them go loopy, and then they put in people that they know are not going to get on with each other. It wouldn't be fun if they were all just like, hey, this is cool, let's just sit and talk about something.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. It was bad, but I suppose it's just the people, the way they looked.
I know what you're saying now. I get you.
yeah, and it was great TV. I was a bit obsessed with it when the early series, but then you compare it to like now,
Love Island,
like, and everyone and every program like that is supposed to be reality type programs, but every program like that, they're all cookie cutouts, and so you're kind of bombarded by this image, and I think it's got worse, and it's just a lot of people just, I don't know. It's hard to compare yourself, and you can't help but compare yourself, even though logically you're just like, well, most people don't look like that, so stop it. But it seeps in, and you can't help but sometimes feel inadequate and stuff.
Well, you show a child superhero movies, a couple of hours later they're like, I'm Spider-Man. You know, and I don't think we get older, there is a part of us that's like, I know I'm not supposed to be like that, or I know I don't need to be like that, but why am I like this? It's just that's the only question. I think we're seeing it with like young people and the feelings that they're having from social media, that people are presenting themselves. But I do hope that culture and mainstream culture flips organically. It feels like what we found with YouTube was like vlogs became a thing, and then vlogs that were presenting life as this perfect picture were a thing, but then that kind of got saturated. So then people wanted more authenticity. So they wanted shakier cameras and real stories, and a couple of people that like just do normal things were able to get a lot of attention. Emma Chamberlain was one of them. She would just like have coffee and talk to the camera. And that was it. Like it wasn't too much pretending, but I haven't watched stuff for a while on YouTube in terms of that kind of stuff. And I know that there is still an element of that. And I make content, and I know that like sometimes I will, if I was filming a selfie video and I was talking and I thought, okay, that was pretty good, if there's a nappy on the floor behind me, which is a complete reality of a young parent, I'm not a young parent, but a parent of a young child, having a nappy on the floor, like that you forget about after changing a nappy is a thing. Maybe that is me. Maybe people are going to say, oh my God, I can't believe you don't put it straight in the bag and bin and whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fear of judgment. I think that's a massive part of it. Like, I mean, most people don't make content because they don't want to, they're scared of what people will think. And it might not even be what the mainstream people outside of their circle think. It might be what their friends think, because they know one of their friends is the person who goes, you are so cringe. And that's all they need to just never make content again. And they know it's coming, so they don't put themselves out there. And I think, yeah, it's hard because the way that promotion goes, and I think it must be like that for you. It's like, I don't, maybe you don't want to keep posting on social media. Being the fact that you're an anonymous artist, that you don't have to show yourself and just can focus on the work, is quite cool. It's quite like refreshing. Everyone's saying, oh, show the process, show this. It's like, nah, just here is the work.
It's a bit of, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think there is part of me that kind of a bit, jealous. Well, maybe not jealous is the word, but like I kind of envy, like, say, what you do is like your face is out there, you have your personality out there, and sometimes part of me is a bit like, oh, I kind of wish I kind of felt like that'd be quite freeing for myself. But at the same time, there's also freeing to be anonymous as well. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I do find that people, when it comes to art, do like to know who the artist is, their personal life and stuff. So it can be a bit of it has a cool element, and there's definitely sides of it I really enjoy. But then there's other sides when I look at other artists and see how open they are, and they kind of can show their everyday lives, and they can show themselves going to a gallery or doing this. And I'm kind of like, oh, I kind of like to do that. I think the grass is always greener, isn't it, when you're looking at other people's sort of way of doing it.
I was sort of jealous of anonymous artists in the NFT space, because essentially you have a blank canvas to create a persona, a public-facing persona.
Sure.
Where you can be very contrary, and you can accentuate that to the point of cartoon character, which I think is interesting. Or you can be just elusive and not say a lot. And some artists, that made them much more interesting. I think Xcopy is one of those, and Pack.
From the art side of things, I think that's always been an interesting. It's always been quite interesting, mysterious. I mean, you just look at Banksy, for instance. Like, people just latch onto it because no one knows who he is, and as soon as people find out who he is, I feel like it's over for him, like, almost, because it becomes like it's part of his artwork, isn't it? Part of his art sort of move, kind of like persona, and his art would not be the same if you knew who he was.
It's not interesting if you know who he is. They found who he is. Basically, they think they know who he is. There was loads of rumours that he was a singer of Massive Attack, and then there was basically this reporter that placed this person, like all of the pieces. There was a Bristolian that was moving from London to Bristol and back and forth and to different parts of the country, and every time that they were sort of doing these things, or seen or spotted or whatever, there was new Banksys appearing, and they found that it could be this guy from Bristol who's like in his 40s and his name's Robin, and it got reported about and the name came out, and it was like, no one wants to know. Like, no one wants to know. You know what I mean? It's like telling somebody the end of it does. Like, I was going to use a rubbish analogy, telling somebody the end of Sixth Sense before watching it. That's not really it's like it affects it. It kind of is just not as interesting than this like mysterious character that appears at night and puts up these huge stencil works and just has a real ability. I mean, what do you has a real ability of connecting to the public in this kind of very like quick to understand pun kind of way. What do you think of Banksy? First of all, also, I have known you a while, and I know that there was a rumor in the NFT space that you were Banksy. Do you want to talk about that, or should we move on? What do you think of Banksy?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but the shortened version is there was this kind of community on NFT community, and it was an NFT project. I won't name them, but it was the funniest thing that's probably happened to me in I don't know
in your journey, in your NFT,
like the whole NFT thing, and so it's typical conspiracy theory, connect the dots sort of thing that only the internet could ever create, and it was and Twitter, and so this community kind of connected these dots, and this with like an early an artist did some fan art of my earlier work blob, one of my blobs, and he was part of the community, and they all connected the dots, and they kind of assumed that I was part of something about that project, but then I don't know how, and I can't explain it, but then the rumor started that I was Banksy, and I thought I was Banksy, and it kind of blew up, and suddenly they started to buy a lot of my work, and I went on their spaces and I was listening to them, and it was hilarious, and I didn't know what to make of it, but yeah, it kind of, in the NFT space, rumors. A lot of it was about rumors, and any little bit of smoke will start a huge bonfire. It would just alight, and it would just pump. So everyone, so if anyone here that got a sniff of any sort of rumor, it will spread so quick, and that's what I experienced in firsthand, and it was the funniest thing, and I couldn't believe what was happening. But it was very short-lived because it was such a random thing. And then so what happened was I was quite popular in this community, and then I quickly became pretty hated in the community because
what happened?
I just randomly, this is how the Twitter algorithms worked. I kind of was scrolling through, and I noticed people in this community were buying this other kind of NFT project, and I thought, oh, this looked kind of cool, and it was all about like riding the wave when it came to collecting these PFP projects. And so I thought, oh, that looks okay. People will buy. I'll buy like that. It wasn't much, and I got it. And unbeknown to me, there was a divide in the community. And they decided to go their separate ways and buy this other project, go into this other project and join this other community.
So they kind of became rival projects.
Yeah. And so
you buying that was showing allegiance to the other project.
Yeah. And I tweeted about it, and I was like,
funny.
Hey, look at me. I bought this. And then I just, as soon as I posted it up, I was like the comments underneath was like, I can't believe you've done this. Like, you traitor. And I'm like, what?
What have I done?
Well, I just bought this silly cartoon. What are you talking about? Like, and and so it was quite. It was the good and the ugly side of things, and I quickly discovered that I was getting quite a lot of hate and nerve fudding, and I heard things like they're going to floor my work and sell it cheap and stuff like that, and so it went from being kind of.
Was that directly to you, or sort of you were reading about it on Twitter
reading
people
about
talking
it,
to each other.
and also some comments directly as well. But it was a real insight in some of the culture with these NFTs communities and projects, and like I don't regret that part of it, because yes, I got hate from it and unfortunate circumstances, but also sometimes that some of the best supporters have come from um, that community, and they still to this day are like the first ones to like anything I post, and I'm just really grateful. And it's just kind of like I'm quite thankful to the kind of Twitter conspiracy sort of gods in a sense, because it was such a random event, but it opened up a load more collectors to me, and they still support me now, which I'm really grateful for. But it was quite an eye-opening experience, and it just highlighted how crazy and stupid the space is as well.
It's a reality of the NFT space, which is that speculation drives price action, and that's quite fun if you're at your computer looking at lines go up and down and you're playing into that. I did a bit of degenning, buying and selling NFTs, like NFT trading, and I remember it fondly, other than the fact that it took so much of my headspace to keep my attention because there was so much happening. Yeah, I found it really fun at times, and I kind of discovered it late, very much towards the bear market. I would be playing a little bit with this Ethereum that I was getting from selling stuff, which didn't necessarily feel like real money. Because I hadn't converted it out into real money yet. Yeah, I just I played, and I found it very fascinating in the way that just this speculative market and things that would influence the price. It was a lot of sort of hearsay and, oh, this person's bullish on it, so they usually are right. Or there was a point where like Gary Vaynerchuk buying an NFT would literally moon the price of an NFT. I felt like he was very much playing in the space. He was supporting artists. He did some spaces where he was sort of highlighting artists that he had bought, which was good for the space and good for artists. So I think, I guess I'm just saying like the buying and selling of NFTs as a culture was something that I found fascinating and really enjoyed participating in. But yeah, it was mad. It was kind of like a mad time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, looking back at it, I do think of it quite fondly. It was exciting, but also extremely stressful at times.
Yeah,
when you kind of first thing you do is wake up in the morning and you check how much that kind of dick butt was worth, or whatever it was called. Or I wasn't lucky enough to buy one of those, but
they did well. They did very well.
Yeah, they did well. Yeah, that was a bad example, but yeah, it was just like. Yeah, and you check and you think, oh no, it's down, and then you get that hot sinking moment, and but then when it's ups, you think you're some sort of genius or something, but really it's kind of a lot of luck. It was fun days. I hope those sort of days will return. Obviously, the market's very different now, but it was the joy of collecting. And kind of keeping your ear to the ground to these sort of things. I wasn't a big collector, but when I did collect something, I would always be quite excited about where it could go. I've got a dead fella, and I would always be interested in what they're doing next. And there were some real legit projects out there who are building something. I know it's a cliche and you hear this kind of word building all the time, but there are some that are doing it, and then others that were just literally buy and sell opportunity type thing. But yeah, there were exciting times. I still look back at it as kind of a feeling of nostalgia and craziness. I'm saying like it's all over. It's not, but it's just that feeling of like those times. I don't know if we would see those sort of times again.
I think it's possible that we see another cycle where there's a lot of excitement and some of those metas reappear, inevitably our belief in blockchain tech is there. I don't think we would be participating in the NFT space if we didn't believe that blockchain tech is kind of an important development in the way that the internet is going to work, and things online and on the blockchain, proven scarcity of digital assets, I don't think is going to go away. But there's a lot of work, I think, that needs to be done. And I don't mean like we all have to work together to change this. I just think like it's time, and it's evolving slowly, and it's very similar to early internet. A lot of the kind of things that were happening in the early internet, didn't last, and big players kind of defined that technology.
It's still so new. It's hard to predict what NFTs will be in 5 years' time. Like, I'm not saying they won't be around, but I'm like, what people's perspective on digital assets, and certainly you're right. Like as a digital artist, it's more native. It doesn't have to be for everyone. I think it will be, because collecting art is a niche thing. Like so it's not going to be like, oh, everyone will collect NFT. I hope it will be more accessible. I suppose that's one argument, isn't it? Is NFTs will potentially, or digital assets potentially, for a broader audience, collect art. Like collecting art is for a very small percentage of people. Like painting's quite expensive thing to buy, and obviously people can buy prints, and that's more accessible. So maybe like collecting NFTs, it might broaden its horizon, as in more people who wouldn't collect art are now collecting art. And I think that's I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say this, like, I wasn't into art, I never collected art before, and now since NFTs come about, I'm actually really into it. I'm learning about this artist, that artist, and now so I feel like that could be more the future of things. It's always I think the NFT space is one of the biggest struggles when it came to art. Is how is it displayed? How is it kind of enjoyed, and we can obviously most of the time through Instagram or Twitter, that's how it's digested, but when it comes to like people from the outside looking at it, or kind of in real life in galleries, I think digital art has always struggled with how to present itself in real life. I think that's why the digital art world has kind of always shunned digital work quite a bit, because it's something that's just on a screen. It's like, and I think hopefully what's come out of this is that over the years, I think ways of displaying digital work has improved, and I think that's one of the barriers that we're facing, is how to display work. Because I've seen some awful kind of ways of some of these kind of art shows, and
NFT London being
NFT, that's the famous one where this kind of wire is exposed, and it's just a TV screen on some cheap stand and sitting in some sort of hallway.
It's like the thing that the teacher used to wheel out and show you science videos.
It's really bad. And so I think it's still a struggle. We haven't, I think, with digital art, I think if it's a moving image, or you can project it, and and that's why I think you see a lot of digital artwork that's doing well in the traditional art world are moving image artists with big projections, and it kind of is a lot easier to present. But as a more static sort of image, still image sort of artist, that's still quite a bit of a problem. And I mean, I personally still prefer prints to screens when it comes displayed in a setting. But yeah, I think that's always going to be a bit of a stumbling block. But as new technologies kind of arise, AR and different ways of consuming art digitally we're at a kind of a very interesting period where it could very much change with AI as well. It's all becoming kind of I think we're probably at the most interesting times technology wise.
Definitely with the advent of AI. How long have you been using AI as a tool, like for your personal work rather than just playing with it to see what the tech is?
I started I started playing with it probably about a year ago with DALL-E, because straight away, because I've always been interested in technology, and I was like, this is crazy, sort of mind-boggling, sort of technology where a computer can create an image. I mean, it's funny how quickly people can just get used to the AI because it's everywhere now. But like back then when it first, I think it was back in 2017, I think there was kind of these first images started to appear. And the actual concept of a computer creating an image, an original image is incredible. And so straight away I was playing around with it. And then I didn't really start making work as in I would feel comfortable saying it's work till like probably about 6 or 7 months ago. And then I started sharing AI stuff because I was just got to a point where
was like, that I couldn't. Still on DALL-E, or were you using different?
I DALL-E, I kind of found it a bit too. It wasn't getting the results I wanted, and so I started using Stable Diffusion, and that's when I was like, right, this is. I tried Midjourney, which is the most famous one, most popular one, but I found it wasn't. The look of it was too samey. Like I felt like if I see a Midjourney work, I feel like I recognize it, and it's probably because I wasn't quite using the tool right. But with Stable Diffusion, I started using that, and I was getting results pretty quickly that I wanted. And after months of playing with it, I kind of felt like I just had to share because I've kind of got a bit of a love-hate relationship with AI because I did resist it for quite a while.
Were you worried? Was it more about sharing it and being worried about the backlash, which was sort of happening across Reddit, etc., about artists that use it? People were saying boycott them, all this sort of stuff.
A little bit, yes. And I kind of was fighting that because I had sort of reaction to AI I was very torn. I was kind of very much like, this is amazing. Conceptually, this is fascinating. Like computer makes art. And it's not just a robotic arm scratching something, which we've seen for the last couple of decades now. Like artists have been using it. And that's fascinating, but this is actually something creating something. I was very torn, and my gut instinct was defensive and a little bit angry. Again, like about AI, because I was just like, this does feel like cheating. It doesn't feel like, being an artist is all about the process and stuff. That's very much the gut reaction. But at the same time, I also fought against that personally because I was like, this is too, not the word radical, that sounds, but this is so destructive. This is, I always thought like, if it pisses people off, including myself, there's something that is doing something right. Like if it pisses people off in the art world, then this is interesting. And I've never seen a reaction like it. There's been plenty of movements in the art world. There's been backlashes. I mean, zombie formalism was like a big phase, and then it got fudded on and it was torn down to pieces in the traditional art world. I've just never seen a reaction like this. It's the amount of anger. And I could understand the anger. I felt angry myself, but then I just thought, well, I've just got to become this. This is happening. Like, if you like it or not, AI art, AI in general will be in everything. It'll be parts. It'll be entangled in everything we do, and I just kind of felt like, well, maybe I just need to play with it and embrace it a bit, and
leaning into the uncomfortable.
Yeah, and like,
similarly to NFTs, because people were
true,
up in arms about NFTs in 2021. Yeah.
And the results I was getting at, results of some of the images that was being created, I couldn't ignore it anymore, and it became like, almost like I became kind of jealous of the AI in a way, because I was the process I use, because I didn't, because there's a thing called raw prompting where you just you type in straight into the AI and they create an image, and there's a skill in that as well, like as a tool, and artists have been using that, but I was always like, I need some sort of process. I need to create something first. So my process with AI would be, I'm a 3D artist, so I sculpt, create, render digital objects, or I use some older works that I've already got. Then I piece them together in Photoshop. So I kind of became like a collage artist in a way, and thought, right, I'm going to feed this into the AI and see what happens. And there's a thing called image to image, where you upload your image to the AI, and then you put in a prompt, and then the AI will develop almost like these set of images using the visual image you've inputted, and there's lots of settings you can use and to play with that. And
is it only using your visuals as inspiration, or is it still using a catalogue of art?
Well, the outcome is difficult to know, but I've used my own artwork, but I've also used some photographs. I've literally cut and paste, because I was like, I mean, for instance, like one of my newest pieces was Bear With Me, it's called, and there is a bear head appearing out of all these blobs, and I did use a picture of a bear, and I cut out the head and stuff.
Like taking a reference image from a magazine to paint.
Yeah, it's no different to a collage artist, or if you're a painter, you look on Google. I mean, like 90% of paintings, I'm sure, have used references,
of course,
from Google, and it's no real different to that. And there's a real big argument about copyright with AI, and that's a whole another subject that's you could go on for talk for hours about that. But I always kind of felt okay with it, because I felt like the way I'm processing it, I'm creating an image that could be in itself, like before even going into the AI, an artwork. But I wasn't interested in that. I wanted the AI to be almost like my collab artist. I wanted it to be my
working with another artist.
Yeah. And it got to the point where it was creating images that I couldn't ignore. Like I felt like in my head, I was like, these are the images that I wanted to make when I was doing 3D stuff. Like, and it was more of a technical boundaries for me to create these works. And I don't think I could create these works in if I was to do it like digitally in a more traditional method, because the imagination the AI has, and I know it's not, I don't know, I know it hasn't got an imagination.
It's an interesting word.
It's something that I can't even like even begin to describe how you would even start. And
what do you mean to begin? How to start to explain?
To explain it, or even to begin to like. I don't think there's anything like it. I mean, the only thing I could like it to is if you're working with a printing press and you create this process on a plate, and you never quite know what it's going to turn out like, because there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be smudges. And so until you put it in the printing press, you don't, and it comes out the other side, you don't quite know what it's going to be like. And I think with AI, I kind of get that similar experience and excitement of it produces something that you have no control over. You can try to control it, but there's elements of it of like, I can't even couldn't even think about putting that in, or
so there's a massive experimental aspect to it.
When I lose myself making work, that's why I do it. The end result is something else entirely. It's like once you've got the final image, you kind of put it up and you've done, and then I'm more interested in working on the next thing than the process of doing again. So I think to me it was always important to have that process, and I found it more fun. I don't find it. I don't get any enjoyment out of just prompting and creating it. There's enjoyment of creating an image out of prompts, I'm sure, but I felt like I would get bored quite quickly if I did that.
Did you feel like if you were doing that and they weren't looking like they were kind of created sort of by you, that there was some inauthenticity there? Do you feel like by putting your own work in, it felt a little bit less? Because people that were saying to me, like, I know the prompts and I'm really good at making prompts and everything that's coming out is exactly what I want. I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. And I find your approach is a lot more refreshing, because you're saying, I don't know what's going to come out, but I'm trying to collaborate to the point where I'm surprised and I enjoy it because I'm surprised, but also that it feels like it's an expression of me. Like it's my art. It looks like my art. It's another step forward from what I've been doing previously.
Yeah, and I think there's the randomness and the moments of chance. I mean, even in, say, painting,
the best bits.
The best bits are the happy mistakes or the random drip, or the bits that you didn't intend to. And so I think when it came to the AI, because with digital art, there's a lot of control. Like you have all control, and you can make anything you like, and you can just hit delete or undo. Like there's chances of mistakes happening, of course, but
it's
with AI,
less flawed, isn't it? It's less flawed than the drip of a paint, or because you're sort of saying, create this flaw. You're in control of the flaw, whereas by now adding AI, you're not in control of the flaw anymore, and it's like sparking that same thing. I remember I was painting spray paint with my left hand, so that I would get the most naive line, and I also like when the paint can comes away, so it gets like wider and then go right down to the canvas or the wood or whatever I'm painting on, and then it goes and it kind of hits it and then creates like a little burst, and that starts dripping. And I remember like putting some process video on social media and getting like 2 or 3 comments of people going like, you really need to work on your can control, man. And I'm like, it's kind of not the point. The whole point of it is for me to get surprised by that line and allow that line to guide the next 20 minutes of work that I do. And is it becoming a relationship with the AI where you're like kind of like knowing or expecting what it's going to do, or is it's still surprising you? And then also, do you get that thing where you're like, is there a conversation now happening where you're feeding the AI's feeding you, and then you're feeding it back? Does that make sense?
I think there is definitely some sort of almost talking to each other in a sense. I mean, it's like if you're collabing with any other artist, there is that kind of, even if you make work separately and then you put your work next to each other, they start speaking to each other in some degree. It does. Like when I start building up images before putting it into the AI or feeding it, like I have a notion in my head now that I have this idea in my head. It was like, I think the AI might like this. Like, it's kind of like, this is going to look cool. I'm sure I've got this. I feel like I know it now. Like, I feel like I'm almost getting to know it, and he's getting to know me. And yeah, I find that really, really interesting. And sometimes I create something in Photoshop or digitally, and it just doesn't work. Like, I put it in, and the AI it's just having an off day. Like, and it feels like it's like how us humans do have an off day of like, oh, I'm in the studio and I'm painting and it's just not working. And I have days like that.
Maybe you're having the off day, and
Yeah,
you're like, whatever you're doing with feeding the AI, you're like not doing it in a way that's like something, you know.
Yeah,
I find it. Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is, and it's and I suppose I have a bit of a romantic view on the AI. Maybe I need to get out more, but like it's like I think I've heard it being described how the AI works is like, it's almost like it's like it has this memory, like, as you know, you have the database that everyone it's a bit controversial, and people argue against the copyright side of things, but it almost acts like the human brain does. So we consume images all the time, and then when the AI kind of wants to create an image, it's almost like has its own memory, and it's trying to recall and recreate that artist or that picture or that animal, and it ends up creating often especially in the early days, often something quite horrific and horrifying,
which you would like.
Which I like. So that's why I kind of like, well, this is, I mean, some of the work that I saw other AI artists produced, and I was like, well, this is like horror, you know, and I was kind of gravitated towards it, and these kind of grotesque images. But yeah, so I kind of liked that kind of I suppose a bit of a romantic view on AI. It's just it's almost like it's trying to be human, or trying to recreate or elements of human life and objects, and just simple things like a vase for the flowers. I think I've seen somebody do flowers, and it's kind of
failing a little bit, like flawed, which is human.
Yeah, flawed, and I think that's where it's quite interesting. As in, I think it will get to a point where AI will be perfect, like, almost, and you won't be able to tell the difference. And I think that's where it'd be less interesting for me as an artist to use that version of AI. I really hope that AI keep the older versions so us artists can use it, because I think that's where the AI has been best, when, you know, it has 10 fingers on a hand, and they try to recreate what a human looks like, and it looks off. But for me, I would always veer to something that's slightly flawed or failed, like we were talking before about the mistakes, the happy mistakes that happen when you're painting or stuff like that.
Yeah, it leads my work. That, like, I need it. I need the flaw. I need the line to be imperfect. I need it to feel authentic for me to even continue. I got to the point where I would scribble on the page before I started to make other marks, because I could feed off that mistake. So I'd like force the mistake, but it would still aesthetically feel loose and real enough for me to make the next mark. And that sounds a little bit like dramatic or whatever, but it's the way that I learned to enjoy the playing the most, and that usually ends up with the best work.
Playing and creating, almost every artist should create their own rules while playing a game, because so it just you kind of lend yourself to mistakes and flaws and stuff, but you kind of have to stick to these rules, otherwise, you can end up with something completely different. So it's almost like you get to know this game you play when you've got an empty canvas in front of you. If I do this, that, and that, and use that certain brush or spray can at a certain angle, this will happen, that will happen. And yeah, it's just openness to mistakes. And that's where AI became kind of quite exciting to me, and opened some doors in that sense. And I just find it fascinating. And I have no idea where it's going to go next, as in, like,
how fast it's going so fast now. I think that's the conversation is now, like, a lot of the conversation I'm hearing from people that know a lot about it is like, when do we get actual, I can't remember the term. Lex Fridman talks about it a lot, but it's like the moment when consciousness, singularity. Yeah. So that's the conversation. If that's the conversation, then almost, in a year's time, these visual tools that we're using are still going to be naive in comparison. And it's going to be very interesting, I think. What do you think of, like, these sort of doomsday? Do you think it's just engagement farming and most people don't really know anything about AI? Or do you feel like there is legitimate cause for concern?
No, I think there is concern. Like, I think it's hard. I've listened to various podcasts and people talking about it, and there's obviously positive sides of AI that will, I mean, for me personally, like, just small things, like, I'm pretty dyslexic and it's helped me write. It's for me, it's like a tool that's so useful. I wish I had it when I was younger and stuff like that, but so things like that, and it would be extremely helpful. But I've heard people say we've kind of fucked up a little bit because we've kind of opened it up to the internet and it's all open sourced, and it's like the Pandora box is open.
Yeah.
And so when you hear stuff like that, you think, oh shit, is this like the beginning of the end? And some people do say that, and it kind of they said that we've kind of lost control, and they warned us not to put it open to the public. It should have been behind closed doors and regulated. But no, it's a free for all, and there's no turning back. That's the thing. It feels like,
I feel like a lot of the cat is out of the bag. I think a lot of people create a narrative around it because it works in short form content to have very dramatic views about it. But our relationship with technology, we've always sort of tried to make technology do what humans do, and AI maybe is going to be something kind of totally different. I think the worrying thing really is, like, people losing jobs. I think I think if you're going to make money out of it, it's easy to have the thing of like, oh, well, we've adapted before and new economies will emerge. And I kind of subscribe to that, but I also don't. I find it interesting. I sort of feel tired by the discussion. I thought it was interesting that, like, everyone became an AI expert. That was an NFT expert.
Faces, yeah, they're all like, and then they're an expert on the Ukrainian Russian war, and it's like, oh, what? Is that the same
you're
guy?
You're an expert in anything that gets clicks. That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like, So I don't know. It's interesting to talk to you. I feel like we could talk for a long time about a lot of other aspects, but I think we've touched on some really interesting aspects of your work and who you are, like who is behind this Peter the Roman name. There's a person behind it, and that person is creating art that does actually talk quite a lot about themselves. I think that's an interesting thing to put out there because you haven't really put that out there yet. I would, hope that this discussion and this conversation causes people to take a look at your work for the first time. and for people that are aware of who you are to take a closer look at the work. I've been staring at this blob that's got this light kind of going, and I'm seeing like, oh, there's a face there. Oh, there's a face there. And then I'm like imagining I'm talking to this
This is just
this
it'd be
blob.
cool if I was like had my moving mouth, just like in the face.
Yeah, there's this like bit where the light hits the bottom side and it looks like a nose and mouth, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of like I'm talking to this thing. But yeah, I hope people take a close look at your work, and and I've had lots of fun talking about our experience in NFTs and AI and you and your work. I
really enjoyed chatting to you, and thanks for having me on, Dan. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to put links to your social media in the show notes and in the description and all those things on the different platforms. And yeah, thanks again.
Cool, man.
I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate.
Right,
Speak to
take
you soon.
care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to follow our guests on whichever social media platform you enjoy using most. Links are in the usual places. Links to all my social media accounts can also be found at the bottom of every single page over on my website at danielcrossan.com. The best way to support this podcast is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please leave a review and even consider sharing the podcast with a friend. Special thanks goes to Low Fox for producing the music for the podcast. Thank you very much again for listening. See you next time. Take care.